All right, guys, we now welcome on the owner of, or co-owner, I suppose, of Emmerling Gase Motorsports in the NASCAR Xfinity Series, a Cedar Rapids, Iowa native, and the 2007 Modified B champion at the La Crosse Fairgrounds Speedway. Everyone, please welcome Joey Gase. Joey, thank you for joining us.
Yeah, thank you for having me on.
I got to hear about the Modified B championship. It said you were the youngest winner on your Wikipedia of that title.
Yeah, so it wasn't like a points championship, but it was a race up there at Oktoberfest, and it's anyone that's in the Midwest or following short track racing. Oktoberfest is like kind of the biggest deal in the Midwest as far as like races, the end of the year, and all that stuff up at La Crosse. But yeah, I was 14, went up there. It's kind of funny, couldn't win at Hawkeye Downs all year, and then we go up there, never been there, and went up there. So that was really cool.
Yeah, Josh and Caleb have been educating me on Oktoberfest in my very poor and lack of understanding of the history of all
This
the.
man's never heard of Oktoberfest.
No, I'd heard of Oktoberfest. I'd never heard of. I think Rob Shear was his name.
Joe Shear.
Joe Shear. I did it again. Yeah, I've done that every week for 3 weeks.
Every single time.
And we've been doing this.
Nice. But yeah, it's a really fun time up there.
Caleb said he had 87 questions for you, so I'm going to let him cook.
Sounds good.
I don't actually have 87, but no, I wanted to talk to you. I was really glad we were going to bring you on after Talladega, and you had a pretty eventful Talladega up and down. So kind of walk us through. You had a 9th place finish, but also caught fire as well.
Buried the lead with the top 10 there, Caleb.
Yeah, it was a wild day for sure. We were having a good run, and then one of the cautions there towards the end, I got sideswiped and came in to try to fix the damage, and they missed some of it, which led to a tire rub and cutting down our left rear tire, and then cut down the tire out at 4, and of course had to go all the way around the track to make it back to pit road, and luckily made it back to pit road. And the good news was that big wreck happened, so the yellow came out, kept me from going a lap down, and then actually red flag came out. But the bad news was the tire destroyed the brake line, which led to a fire, and then caught the tire also on fire. And then they're on pit road, they couldn't get to go out, and then all the chemicals from the fire extinguisher and then the rubber burning and all that ended up inside the cockpit, which forced me to get out. And luckily they let me get back in the car after we got it out. But normally once you get out of the car and drop the net, you're not allowed to keep going. But luckily the circumstance let me get back going, and we crimped the left rear brake line. So I was only running on 3 brakes there at the end, but we made it back out. And at first I was just going to limp around, but the car felt good enough to where I went forward, and luckily missed the big one at the end and ended up 9th.
How difficult is that to kind of judge that when you're the car owner, especially just on like how far you can push the car? And I know obviously like it's not a typical 9th place finish. Like you didn't finish 9th with no damage, but does like the top 10 for you guys ensure that you made a profit this weekend, or is there damages with the fire and stuff that kind of complicates that?
I don't know about profit. Well, we're still working that out. But as far as a points day, which is super important, it was a really good points day from us. So in our world, always higher up in points you are, the better, no matter what. But as far as provisionals, higher up you are, the better. And then the other really important thing is the the bonus money. So anytime your car numbers in the top 30 in owner points, you get what's called the bonus money, which is a minimum of $7,000 a race, which is really important to a small team like ours. And we're tied for 30th now after that weekend. We've had some misfortune here at the beginning of the season. We've definitely had speed, but I think we're going here in the right direction now, and that definitely gave us some breath to get back going again, and attitudes on our team definitely went in the right direction after the weekend.
What explain to me kind of your decision of, starting to own your own Xfinity team and then expanding to like 2 cars and even taking on some ARCA races. Like, what made you decide that's something that you wanted to do?
Yeah, the big part of that honestly was the next gen car. I was racing the Cup Series pretty much full time the last 2 years before we started my own team full time, and the next gen car, the costs of that were just so high to where my sponsors that were with me in the Cup Series couldn't afford to go to that level. So I knew if I was going to continue to race, it was going to basically have to be an Xfinity, and the costs of Xfinity were also very high. And if I wanted to make a living and all that, I decided that it would be best for me to start my own team, to where, if I didn't have enough sponsorship on what I thought I wanted to have that weekend, or the break even or make money or whatever it might be, well, then now it's not only me needing or myself having to bring sponsors to the team, I could also have other drivers who have sponsors come to the team as well. So it just kind of made more sense for me to go down that path. And it was something that I've been thinking of for a long time. And on top of that, I've been a driver for a long time, but the whole time I was never just a driver. I was also, a crew member working on the cars, wrapping the cars, always getting my own sponsors and dealing with the sponsors and doing many tasks that a team owner would need to do. So I'm learning every day still as a team owner, but it definitely put me in the right path of knowing a lot of things that I would need to be a team owner. And then when I met Patrick Immerling, he wanted to do his own team as well, and he was already kind of doing that with our motorsports. And he had all the equipment that I didn't have, and I had all the equipment he didn't have, and it made sense for us to join together, and that's what we did.
Do you think, like, whether you have a strong opinion on it or not, but, they talk about in the Cup Series, like trying to attract new teams and have these people invest in NASCAR. Do you have any strong opinions on that with like the rising costs of just owning a team or racing in the series, along with the charter system that I know is a pretty hot topic right now?
Yeah, I mean, it's really hard for anyone new to come into the sport unless someone leaves the sport right now on the Cup side, because there's 36 charters and there can't be any more than 36 charters. And unless you have an insane amount of money, you can't run without a charter. And the reason for that is because the pay difference is so different. Well, there's multiple reasons, but the biggest thing is it's like, I believe right now it's for a chartered team gets 70% more money than a non-chartered team does to finish like the same position in a race. So it's super hard to afford to do that financially. I like the idea of the charter system as far as like it gives an owner, a current owner, something to fall back on to sell. And then if they were to leave the sport, and it also gives people a reason to come to them to either drive or sponsor or whatever, because they're locked into the race, which is huge, obviously. But that's definitely the one bad part, is that, with the charter system, really nobody can come in new unless someone leaves and someone sells their stuff. To where on the Xfinity side, I think the racing right now is the best it's ever been, and the competition's the best it's ever been. But with that being said, it's also the most expensive it's ever been for multiple reasons. You have guys who normally would go run in the Cup Series now running in the Xfinity Series, like myself, because the cost in Cup's too high. But now that number amounts now down here in the Xfinity Series, and there's not as many cars in the Cup Series as there was, because it's more expensive to do, so they come down to the Xfinity Series. And then on top of that, there's not a charter system. We have a point system that you still, higher on your points, more likely are to get a provisional, but you're never guaranteed. So with that, the whole field now is just, you have to bring your A game every week to stay up in points, and also on top of that, to make sure you make races. So, like 7 years ago when I was driving for Jimmy Means, we would be on scuffed tires pretty much all day, and the cost was probably a quarter of what I'm spending today, and you could get away with that because the competition wasn't as high. But now you see teams like Jimmy and other teams like him really struggling and or no longer in the sport because of that.
Joey, how, when you are trying to get new sponsors, and especially in the situations like you guys are in the Xfinity series, how creative or do you have to be trying to attract new people and say this is a good investment for you?
Yeah, you definitely have to be creative for sure, and there's different ways of doing it. There's definitely much more just being a billboard out there with someone's name and say, "Hey, look, my name's on a race car." There's a lot more to it than that. And, people use it as like SciAps, for example, who sponsors CJ for us, who's driving this weekend. They use it for marketing, but the big platform they use it for is to bring their high-end customers and employees and possible new customers to the racetrack and give them that experience, which they love. And that's really working out well for them and stuff like that. So there's a bunch of different ways, our organ donation stuff. There's a bunch of different ways we get promotion for them. And their main goal is to honor families and then also register or getting people to register to be organ donors. And we've been successful with that as well. So you just got to cater to each sponsor's need. If it's marketing, if it's thanking their customers or making sure their customers have a good time or whatever it might be. And there's a bunch of B2B deals as well. So and a lot of it, is just from meeting people and using connections and stuff like that as well.
So Joey, I was looking at kind of your Wikipedia and stuff, and obviously a 3-time Daytona 500 starter. By the way, the career stat of worst Daytona 500 finish in 3 attempts at 23rd is got to be like I'd hang my hat on that. Like you'll finish in the top half of the field every Daytona 500 with Joey Gase. I did want to ask you, so BJ McLeod. I wanted to ask, how cool is BJ McLeod?
Yeah, I've been around BJ for a long time, and he's a little hard to get a hold of sometimes now that he's at the Cup level, but he's a character to say the least. And when I started this deal, I didn't want to do everything that BJ is, or maybe, do something a little different than what he has done or doing currently and stuff like that. But, I was like, if I start my own team, like if you look at BJ example, he started his own team. He drove for it full time. And then he went to a 2-car team, drove 1 car, and then had other drivers drive the other car. And then he had 3 cars, and he wasn't driving his own car at all, and it was all sold, and he was driving for somebody else. And then he went to the Cup Series. So that was kind of like, one of the things I was looking at, if I could kind of do kind of the same stuff that BJ was doing there, it was another reason why I started my own team as well.
Have you ever looked at his sunglasses? Because I got to assume he walks in a room wearing those and he just commands everyone's attention.
His outfits and jewelry and stuff is definitely different to say the least.
So is that like kind of what the goal is? Because I wanted to ask you, in the 5-10 year plan of your team, is that kind of maybe what you're thinking is down the road, you be back in the Cup Series again? Yeah,
that would be great if we could do that. It definitely would be tough to do that with the cost. And then, it's crazy to think that, one of the teams the team I made my first Daytona 500 start with was BK Racing. And I think 2018, they shut down, and Front Row bought them, and Front Row bought absolutely the whole team, the charter, all the parts and pieces, everything for $2 million. So if you had a crystal ball then and knew just what the charter was going to go to now, which is like a minimum of 20 million, not saying I had $2 million back then, but if I had a crystal ball, I'm sure I could have, bought one. And that's one thing my partner and I talk about all the time is like, man, if you just bought a charter back then and had one now, life would be really good. But that That's definitely would be something we'd love to do. We'd have to find a charter to do that, or like you say, just go drive again in the Cup Series. But that's definitely would be a goal for sure to be able to do that. But if we can, I don't really see us or wanting to grow past a 2-car team unless we had, big fully funded sponsors for each car. I think 2 is kind of the perfect number here in the Xfinity series. But as long as we can continue to grow and get better every year, and first and foremost survive, which is just really hard to do right now, I think that would be great. And the one thing I'm really proud of too is that I'm super thankful, and I've learned a lot from every car owner I drove for. But I think the one thing that's kind of cool is that I'm kind of run the best this year, almost running for myself and then our team in general compared to the teams that I drove for in the past. So I think for myself, that's kind of pretty cool. And then also just where they are in owner points, being either right with them or ahead of them, I think is kind of cool too.
What car owner taught you the most? You've driven for a ton, so I'm excited to hear this answer.
Probably Jimmy Means for sure. Just for one, I drove for him the longest, and he learned how to do a lot of things on a shoestring budget. But I definitely learned from a lot of different people. Bobby Dotter, where Carl Longer. I learned from all of them, and I still talk to all of them a lot. I've talked to them all this year multiple times. Bobby and I talk to each other a lot. We're all competitors against each other, but at the same time, we help each other a lot too. On a lot of different ways. So the racing world is a pretty cool world. If you do something bad, it's not good because it's a really small world and everybody knows, but it's just one big family for sure.
So I have to ask, because you did mention that you brought some stuff that Emmerling didn't have. Emmerling brought some stuff that you had. So what's the chemistry like, and how's that grown so far? Because he's obviously been around multiple series for a long time. You've been up and down through series, experiencing with getting the experience with ownership with teams and stuff. So what's kind of like the chemistry like, and how's the personalities kind of create this one big brand essentially?
Really good. I think the only thing is me and him are maybe both too nice of guys sometimes. I think sometimes we almost need to be harder bosses with our guys, to be honest. But we're pretty much the exact same age. We have kids the same. We're great friends, and it's really worked really well. And it's kind of crazy how it all worked out. But it's worked out great, and our chemistry is really good together. We're friends. We share the office and all that stuff. So it's a lot of fun, and I really could not ask for a better co-owner for sure.
So I followed all the Iowa natives that have kind of ran through NASCAR in the top 3 series in the sport, like my entire life. Kind of just being an Iowa State fan, I wanted to see the guys from Iowa and see them do well and root for them every week. Biggest thing I wondered when I was growing up, and I was a little fat kid, so it'll make sense when I ask you this, but Landon drove for BK Racing as well. I want to know how much free Burger King you got while you were driving for BK Racing.
Absolutely zero.
Well, that's disappointing. This has ruined. That's ruined my childhood moment for sure.
Yeah. So there's a lot of details and story if you really look into all the BK stuff and what happened and with Ron Devine and.
I was going to ask you, what's the craziest story that you're allowed to tell on here, if you had one?
I don't know. There's a lot, but like Ron, the reason it was called BK Racing is because Ron. I don't think Ron was ever, I don't know if they're ever actually even sponsored really by Burger King, but Ron owned a bunch of Burger Kings, like a bunch of them. So that's where he had his funding to start the team. And he did that because of that and trying to get, corporate Burger King to actually sponsor them and all that kind of stuff. But long story short, he lost his Burger Kings for doing something that probably wasn't great. And then that's kind of when things kind of started to go downhill. But yeah, BK Racing, I had the opportunity to definitely be a really, really good team. But it was kind of a shame to see all the things that happened and stuff for sure. But that Daytona, my first Daytona 500 experience was definitely a that whole weekend in general was or week and a half was probably one of the funnest week and a halves of my career so far.
How unreal was it when you saw that you were qualified into the 500? I don't know if you were guaranteed a spot that year or what, I can't remember, but how sweet was it and surreal to just like reach that?
It was really cool. I was locked in that race, but I had to get my teammate into the race, and our specific team was hoping we weren't going to be in the same race or duel as my teammate because we didn't want to have to risk our car to help him get in. But we got him in too, and he actually wrecked the other person doing it, which wasn't so good. But that whole week and a half was
to Travis Pastrana.
Yeah, exactly. But it was surreal. And then I was also doing double duty and driving for Jimmy, and I wasn't locked in with Jimmy, but we got in. And besides this past week, and that was my last top 10 was with Jimmy there in Daytona that same weekend. And it was just a really, really awesome weekend. And the experience, it's a little different now than what it was back then. The 500 was a true week and a half weekend. You had a ton of practice, just a ton of different stuff leading up to it. But it was a really cool experience. And, if I was ever had a choice of doing one race a year, it definitely would be the Daytona 500. The environment, the excitement, just everything on that weekend is just surreal.
Do you think NASCAR, especially in the Cup Series, and I mean, has your opinion on it changed since you've become a team owner? But are you for more practice, or what the kind of condensed weekend schedule is like now?
It depends on the weekend, honestly. Like, not having full practice does and doesn't save money. You don't have as many laps, but leading up to it, you have to be more prepared than normal, getting to the racetrack by like going to the chassis dyno, going to the pull down, all that kind of stuff. But then also your setups have to be, as far as not having practice, as far as having speed on the racetrack, it probably hurts small teams more than the big teams because we don't have simulation and alliances and all that stuff like the big teams have. But the amount of tires you would buy are the same. Really, the only way it saves you is that you don't have quite as many laps on the motor than you would otherwise. But I don't know. I go back and forth on it for sure, and it kind of depends on the weekend for us too, if we're fast in the race or not.
Do you find that there's like times where you guys get to be like qualifying race and you're like, okay, this is an issue that would have been solved if we had practice, or are you guys?
Yeah, absolutely. I think everyone's had that for sure.
Yeah, I mean, for me, like, I feel like that's the biggest thing is I hate, especially with the smaller teams, to see a smaller team go out and because the cards that they're dealt with, and then they go out for like qualifying or we start the race and, they have an issue that, could have been found had they just gotten 5 practice laps. And
right, which we at least have the 20-minute session, so you can fund a lot of that stuff. The thing is now, like some of the stuff you can't fix fast enough because you go right back into qualifying and the cars are also impounded. So like you're stuck with what you got, but you can tune on it. You can't change, actual springs or anything like that. If your splitter's hitting, you can fix that. But yeah, back when we had absolutely zero practice, it was super, super nerve wracking because, especially in the Cup Series, like, if there's nothing worse than having a bad car in a Cup race or your radio not working or anything like that when you're in the car for up to 5 hours. It's absolutely miserable to say the least. And I had times where the car is either horrible or I couldn't hear anyone all race. My radio isn't working and stuff like that. So that was definitely not fun at all when we were back having those days.
You mentioned driving for Jimmy Means and, being kind of a history buff in the sport. He obviously blazed his own trail and kind of did things his own way. I guess you kind of touched on it too, but how cool was the experience to work with a guy who really is deemed a legend in the sport because of the way he did things?
Yeah, it was cool, for sure. I would say he's probably one of the most hard-headed guys I ever dealt with, which, a lot of ways is good ways, and some stuff, we didn't always see eye to eye on, but, definitely with, I always said it, two different ways. If it wasn't for Jimmy, I definitely would not be, where I am today. And I honestly think if it wasn't for me, Jimmy wouldn't have been in the sport for as long as he was either. We kind of really honestly saved each other's careers, which was really cool. And, it all kind of started as Tim Schindel, who was a late model racer from Wisconsin, drove for him. And he gave me his contact information and said, hey, you should try the, drive for him here and there. And I had a little bit of sponsorship at Iowa. I drove for him. I think we blew up like 30 laps into it, but they mounted my seat in the car, and lucky for me, I was a very small, tiny person, and they're a small team, and they didn't want to change the seat, and I did a good enough job, and I just started to stay in the car because they didn't want to change the seat, and we started to do better and better. So it was kind of cool how it all worked out, and we started to make more races than what Jimmy normally made, and then we made it to a full-time team, which led to us getting more sponsorship and being a legitimate team again, which was really cool.
With your career, Joey, and like I'm going to try to ask this in a non-offensive way, but you've been scratching and clawing for so long to try it, and you get in the seat, you run above average, but it's hard to open any eyebrows without, finishing top 15 4 weeks in a row or something like that. What is it like, I guess, to kind of keep scratching and clawing, and where's the motivation at that you get to keep fighting for that every week?
I'm a racer, and I know, and anyone that knows me well knows I'm better than most, to be honest. I'll say this right to Landon, and I love Landon. I honestly, truly think I can go beat Landon any day of the week, you name it, or Brett Moffitt or Sammy Smith or any of those guys. And there's one thing that they all know. My mom was a hairstylist, and my dad worked at a power plant. I'm here today, and there's not too many people in the sport in general that can say that. So I'm really, really proud of that. My family had, we weren't a poor family by any means, but we weren't a wealthy family by any means either. And there's not too many people in the sport today that can say they made it here truly on talent and going to find true sponsors. And, I'm really proud of that, to say that. And, when we do go out there and outrun these guys on half the budget that they have, that what makes me feel really, really good. And I'm super proud of that. And the one thing people always say, to be honest, I'm not a Ross Chastain fan at all. Most drivers will
Hey,
say
we'll get along perfect then.
You have made his
clips.
entire night. You
We'll say
crushed
that
his
same
dreams,
thing,
and you made his
but-
night, like in the same sentence.
But the one thing I always go back to is the Mid Ohio race in 2018. That year, or I was in a little bit better equipment than what I was used to having, and the one thing that always kind of rubbed me the wrong way with Ross's story is that they always play the card. Oh, I'm just a poor farmer from Florida, and I'm here with a low budget team and all that stuff. Which, don't get me wrong, Ross is a hell of a race car driver, but they had funding to get to where they are today. Is his family farmers? Absolutely. But you know what? His family owns the biggest watermelon farm in the state of Florida. And with being from Iowa, we know farmers aren't necessarily poor. but the other thing is he had Ganassi cars at Johnny Davis that they're given. And Johnny Davis is no slouch. They work really hard and stuff too. But, that's what gives me the motivation to keep going. And there's tracks that I know I'm really good at. And, I really wish we went back to Iowa Speedway, but when we go the Richmonds, the Martinsvilles, the Phoenix and stuff like that, I know I honestly feel like I'm one of the best drivers in the field when we go there. And, at the super speedways as well, I'm not always there up front all race, but that's because I know I got to be there at the end of the race. And, like CJ, he finished 13th, which was a great finish for our team. But at the same time, it was a real bummer. We absolutely destroyed that car. That was probably might be a $70,000 hit for our team, just so we can't afford to do that. And, my one downfall, I will say, as a driver, and this is because I didn't have a lot of funding, from racing at Hawkeye Downs or wherever it might be. If I wreck that car that week, I might not be able to race the next week. So I'm not always on edge as far as the other drivers are maybe making as aggressive moves as they do. And I probably never will. And that's just because that was the way I raised. And if I wrecked that car that week, if I was at Jimmy's or Rick Ware's or, even where I am today, we might not be racing the next week.
Honestly, Joey, that's the best answer I've ever gotten to an interview question I've ever asked.
Yeah, I'm honest and I'm blunt, and that's just how I always try to live my life.
We'll get Blunt Joey trending on Twitter instead of Blunt Larson for now on.
There you go.
We gotta figure out a campaign to get NASCAR to come back to Iowa. They've kind of left us in the Midwest, kind of out in the dry and everything. But I want to go through your answer to that question. Like, we talk about Chastain just about once a week because everyone says, "Oh, NASCAR needs a villain. They need a guy to go in and be the bad guy and screw people's races up and stuff." And I'm like, yeah, you can do that. You can just do it on a microphone though. Like, you don't gotta tear apart cars every week. I don't think any racing series necessarily needs that.
Right. Yep. Exactly. And the thing is, now he's at least honest about it. And what really rubbed me wrong back in the Xfinity series is he was the same way, but he would brutally lie about it, which was a big bummer. But now everyone calls him out on it enough now to where that can happen. But like I said, do I like Ross on the racetrack as a person? Absolutely not. But is he a hell of a race car driver? Absolutely. No one can ever take that away from him.
You're absolutely right. And then we were laughing when you mentioned the other Iowa guys because we bring them up every week. And these guys all think I got a favorite over one or the others. I'm just going to say we've tried to get Landon Castle on before. He's dodged all our messages. You've definitely moved above him on my rankings. So you're basically number one.
Yeah, I always try to stay humble and, remember the people to where it got me here today. And I've always been a huge fan of Hawkeye Downs. My dad raced there before I did, and I always loved going back there and racing and all that. So it's pretty cool. And it's wild to think Sammy Smith raced out there and Legends, Landon to go back there and race. Brett Moffitt raced there some, but you hardly ever see those guys go back there and race, and it's just kind of mind blowing to me. And I remember Landon, we were talking at intros one day, and I think he came back and raced somebody's late model once, and it didn't go very well, and he was kind of upset about it. And he asked me, he's like, "Man, when you go back there and race, whose car do you drive? Who's late model?" I'm like, "Mine. It's the same car I raced 15 years ago out there." But I've been itching to put that back together. I don't think I ever will. That's kind of just my baby. And since 2008, from 2018, I think was the last time I raced it out there, I never wrecked it. So I kind of want to keep it that way. And, I'm super excited to race out there next weekend in Brian's car, and thankful Brian for letting me have that opportunity. And hopefully we'll have some fun again out there.
Yeah, I wanted to talk because you kind of did the segue for me. You'll be back next week for the 98th season opener of Hawkeye Downs. And last year you had a good, fantastic, like we were just talking, Josh had to remind me that you won the race there last year, because I remembered the battle for the lead and the 3 wide more than I won the race. And I think you can say that's a good race when I don't even know who won the race. I just remembered the battle for the lead.
One of the greatest things to see was that race. Just it was just art. All of it was. I left me speechless, and I'm still speechless to this day.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun, and it was awesome. The race we were able to put on for everybody, and that series I think is really, really cool, and the way the cars drive and all of that. So I think there might be even more cars out there, it sounds like, for the race next week. So it should be a really, really good show.
Yeah, I know they've been really working on that series, and it's I remember when I first kind of started covering racing in like 2016, 2017, they I don't want to say a whole lot bad about them because I mean they were all still pretty decent, but it wasn't, as serious. I don't think a lot of those guys took it as seriously as what kind of they do now. And I know they've had kind of some ownership changes, and they're really working to make improvements for that series. So yeah, every time they come to Hawkeye Downs, and every time we watch them at Fest, I mean they put on one whale of a show, and yeah, I'm excited to see what you guys can do again this year.
Yeah, absolutely. We're looking forward to it.
Joey, I'm not sure how good your relationship is with Caleb, but I wanted to gauge on how good of a driver he is. Would you fund a 4-cylinder car for him at Hawkeye Downs?
If I had the extra money and it wasn't all going to out here, absolutely. And you'd be
Impressive,
amazed
Caleb.
you'd be amazed the amount of people that ask me to fund their rides at Hawkeye Downs.
I want to make sure to clarify I was not asking for you to do that. I just want to
Yeah.
Nor
Sure.
did I
Why
ask him to
not?
do that.
I wanted to see how talented you are because I can't get out there to watch you race.
Yeah, you need to come next Friday.
Is it next Friday?
Next Friday is the season opener, May 5th.
Oh, fuck yeah, I'll be there. I can come there.
That's my plug.
Let's do it.
All right, I guess we're rallying all there because I might. If Connor's gonna show out, I might as well.
I'll
make
buy the
drive.
beer. It's drinks on me. Joey, you drink beer?
I do not, be honest.
You drink it? Do you drink it all?
I don't.
You're
do
a
not.
racing team owner. I can't ask you to
Come
do
on
that.
now.
Not for us.
No, that'll be a good time. I've got an extra couch here. Josh has a bed here, so yeah, more than welcome on that. So yeah, I'm excited. Working actually on the season opener story coming up, so it's going to be a fun time, a good season opener. We got a total of 6 classes racing that night, and of course the mid-am, we've got the NASCAR driver Joey Gase. We've got a part-time ARCA driver that's going to be in the field, and like I said, last year there was a phenomenal 3-wide battle for the lead for the longest time, and it was some great racing. So
All right, Joey, I think this will be the last question, I guess. I ask every driver this. You can no comment. You can say whatever you want. If there was a guy you could fight, another driver you could fight, who would it be?
I'll probably have to no comment back.
That's fine. We have some guys that pick the smallest guy in the field because they think that's the easiest guy to pick out. That's the easiest guy to beat in a fight. But
I'll say that because I'm one of the smaller guys. Normally, say the smaller guys are normally the guys we gotta watch out for.
So follow-up question to that: is there a guy that you have in mind and you just won't say, or
Not really, I guess. I don't know. I have a bunch of rivals. I have a list, I guess you'd say. But yeah, definitely.
I want to see the list off the record. Do you have it written down?
I won't say though.
He's gotta.
Will you bring the list to Hawkeye Downs on Friday?
And then the other thing is too, now with being an owner, I have to be extra careful because you never know if these guys are going to end up driving for you or wreck your stuff or what it might be.
As an owner, do you have to ever think about that? Coming to a crossroads, guys that you wouldn't like to. I mean, you wouldn't like them racing against you, but you have them drive your car. Is there a lot of crossover there or no?
It's kind of funny. There is one, not so much for me, but for Patrick, which Matt did a really good job for us in Martinsville the other week. Patrick's, I think, first ever Xfinity race, he got wrecked pretty much by no reason by Matt. We don't know what happened, but he absolutely despised him, and then now he's driving for us. So it's funny sometimes how things work out for sure.
I mean, we've seen that in the past in the sport too. You look at the Clint Boyer, Jeff Gordon, how they fought and then ended up working together. There was Clint Boyer's comments with Michael Waltrip, and then he was driving for Michael Waltrip. So
Kyle Busch try to beat up Richard Childress.
Yeah,
wasn't that something that
happened? So yeah, I mean, there's multiple cases of that happening throughout the years for sure.
Yep, absolutely.
I was trying to think, who was it that you tried to fight in the garages the one year at Dover?
That was Spencer Gallagher.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
That makes sense. I mean, that makes sense.
Oh man.
Back to the no comment.
Wow. Can't blame Joey Gase for not commenting, Jeff. Joey, we had an IndyCar guy on, Nick Yeoman, if you know who that is, a few weeks ago, and Josh spent the back half of the interview chirping him about his beloved Purdue basketball team, and just kept putting down Purdue. So I'm just trying to keep Josh from putting down Joey right now.
I can't put down Joey Gase. My business was on his car at one point. I can't take him down.
How'd that come together? What was that story? Educate me a little.
We asked him what the lowest amount possible was that we could have for a sticker on his car, and he told us, and so that's what we did. Our now pretty much defunct business, but life's taken us too many.
I know that absolutely still meant a lot to you guys at the time, and people like Joey that allow people to do that are probably some of the best people in the sport, honestly.
Well, and that's, I mean, for me too, it's like giving back to, even the tiniest little bit, giving back to people that really, are a large part of my life too. So, and I understand, I mean, I've ran a Hornet team, and that's on the tiniest little scale, but I mean, I know how much money, time, and work goes in just for that. So, I understand to a certain level of, what the small teams go through, and it's insane. They're insane for doing it. I don't know how they do it, but
Yeah, and it doesn't matter what level of racing you are. Obviously, this level is just that much more work and time and money. But no matter what level of racing you are, if it's a go-kart, it's a Hornet, whatever, if you're successful, it takes a lot of hard work and time for sure.
Joey, I think that's a perfect way to end on this. I would also throw in that I'd guarantee if you were in a Red Bull Formula One car this season, you'd lap the field every race.
That would be fun. I would like to try that someday. That's for sure.
You got super license points?
Probably not. I don't even know how you get those for sure.
No, my entire, I don't know, you can call it a gimmick or a shtick or whatever. I just trash F1 every day, just with their fan base compared to IndyCar and the product IndyCar puts out. I think IndyCar is too competitive and too pristine right now to overlook. And every new racing fan that comes up to me comes up and says, have you seen Drive to Survive? Do you know what F1 is? And I'm like, man, you got to check out IndyCar. You got to go check out NASCAR. So we appreciate you joining us, though. Yeah. Thanks a ton.
Yeah, well, thank you so much, guys. Hope you have a good rest of your night.
You too. Thank you.
Yep. Bye-bye.